Quinn Harper, don't touch that paint can. His 5-year-old daughter shouted from the front yard, arms crossed, eyes narrowed with the intensity of a drill sergeant. Quinn laughed under his breath and wiped a smear of white paint off his cheek with a rag. Relax, Jules. I've been painting longer than you've been alive. Juliet Harper, all 3 feet of sass and stubbornness, rolled her eyes dramatically and plopped down on the grass. Still doesn't mean you're doing it right. He glanced at the fence. Half of it was already coated in a fresh, clean white, while the other half still looked weathered and gray. Not perfect, but better. He'd been walking Juliet home from the nearby park when he saw her covered in paint, struggling with a ladder and trying to balance a paint tray in one hand. The fence wrapped around a massive property that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The woman had looked up, clearly exhausted, and he didn't even think before offering help. He hadn't known her name at the time. Just saw a tired woman with a brush in her hand and a fence that looked like it could eat her alive. Now, 3 hours later, the sun was starting to dip, Quinn's back was screaming, and Juliet was demanding snacks every 5 minutes. The woman Ellery Monroe came around the corner with 2 bottles of water and a pack of crackers. "Sorry, I only had these in the pantry," she said, cheeks pink from the heat, her chestnut ponytail frizzing at the edges. Juliet snatched the crackers like she hadn't eaten in days. "Thank you." Quinn took the water, nodding. "You didn't have to do that." "We're just about done anyway." "You've done more than enough," Ellery said, looking at the fence, her lips parting in actual awe. "Seriously, you saved me at least 2 weeks of work." "I doubt that," he chuckled, "but it was no trouble." Juliet turned to her. "Are you gonna pay my dad, Jules?" Quinn warned, his cheeks going red. Ellery laughed. "I'd be happy to. What's your rate?" "I didn't do it for money," Quinn said quickly, standing and brushing the grass from his jeans. "I saw you struggling and figured it was the neighborly thing to do." She tilted her head. "But you live on the other side of town, right? The apartment's near Maine." That caught him off guard. "How'd you know that?" "You mentioned it earlier," she said. "When you were talking about the plumbing issues in your bathroom." He'd forgotten he even said that. Probably while he was cursing at the roller brush. Juliet tugged on his sleeve. "Can we go now? I'm hungry for real food." Ellery stepped forward. "Wait, can I at least make you dinner?" "As a thank you, I don't bite, I swear." Quinn hesitated. He didn't make a habit of accepting invitations from beautiful strangers with giant houses and mysterious eyes, but she looked genuine, and he hadn't had a warm meal in days that didn't come from a microwave. "All right," he said slowly. "But only if you let me bring dessert next time." She smiled wide. "Deal." Ellery's kitchen was the size of Quinn's apartment. Juliet's eyes nearly popped out of her head when she stepped inside and saw the double oven and massive marble island. "Is this a castle?" she whispered. "No, sweetie," Ellery laughed, crouching beside her, "but I do like to pretend it is sometimes." Quinn was still trying to wrap his head around it. The outside of the house had looked old, almost neglected, but inside, it was pristine. Renovated, every detail was elegant and modern but warm. Not the kind of place you'd expect someone to live in alone. Ellery moved around the kitchen with ease, setting pasta to boil, pulling ingredients from the fridge like she actually knew what she was doing. "I hope you like fettuccine Alfredo." "It's the only thing I can cook without burning." "That sounds amazing," Quinn said, leaning against the counter watching her. She glanced at him. "You look like you've had a long week." He gave a dry laugh. "Try a long year." She didn't push, just nodded and focused on grating cheese. Juliet wandered over to the living room where a giant bookshelf nearly touched the ceiling. "You have like 1,000,000 books." "I love to read," Ellery said gently. Juliet pointed. "You have first editions. My dad sold one of those on eBay once to pay our rent." Quinn closed his eyes. "Jules?" But Ellery didn't look offended. If anything, her expression softened. Dinner was quiet but comfortable. Juliet talked the most, rambling about school and cartoons and how her dad made the best pancakes in the world, even if their stove only had one working burner. "I like your dad," Ellery said to her, smiling. "He's a good man." Juliet nodded matter-of-factly. "He is, but he's lonely." Quinn nearly choked on his pasta. "All right, time for dessert." Ellery laughed again, and the way the sound danced through the kitchen made something shift in Quinn's chest. When they left, Ellery walked them to the gate. Thank you again, she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. For helping me today, he shrugged. Anytime, and thanks for dinner. That was the best meal we've had in weeks. She glanced at Juliet, who was half asleep in his arms, then back at him. You're doing a good job, you know. He didn't respond right away. The compliment hit harder than she probably realized. Let me repay you, she said quickly, before he could protest. I mean it. I've got a lot of work to do on this place. I could use someone handy. I'll pay you, fairly. He hesitated. I'm not a contractor, but you're capable. And I trust you. He looked into her eyes, saw nothing but honesty there, and something else, something softer, curious, like she was trying to figure him out. He nodded slowly. All right, just for a little while. She gave him a small smile. Good. I'm glad. As he carried Juliet down the road, heart still beating a little faster than it should have, he didn't notice Ellery watching from the gate, hand resting on the wood they'd painted together, a thoughtful look on her face. She hadn't told him yet, not about the inheritance. Not about the billion-dollar tech company her father had left her when he passed last year. Not about the reason she'd bought this old house in the first place, to get away from the boardrooms and the pressure, to find something real. But maybe, just maybe, she already had. Do you always wake up this early, or is this just some kind of dad superpower? Ellery's voice floated over the porch railing, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug as the morning mist clung to the rolling hills behind the house. Quinn stepped back from the foundation he'd been inspecting, brushing dust off his knees. Old habit. When you're used to clocking in before sunrise, your body stops asking for permission. She leaned on the railing, watching as Juliet chased a butterfly across the overgrown lawn in her borrowed rain boots. You know, I haven't seen her sit still once since you got here. She doesn't do still, Quinn said, tightening the strap on his tool belt. Unless she's asleep, and even then I'm not convinced. Ellery smiled into her cup, then tilted her head. What do you think of the porch? Structurally. He walked over, crouched low by the steps, and ran his fingers over a warped board. You've got rot along the edge. If you wait too long, it'll spread. I can reinforce it, but the whole thing's gonna need replacing by next year. She set her cup down on the railing. Then let's start with reinforcement. I trust your judgment. He looked up at her, surprised again by how easily she deferred to him. Most people with money, real money, didn't ask. They ordered. Not that he knew she had money, not really. But something about the way she carried herself, the way her clothes fit a little too perfectly, the subtle shine of her earrings, none of it matched the peeling paint and cracked shutters. You sure? He asked. Could get expensive. Her answer was immediate. I'm not worried about that. He nodded once and stood. All right. I'll need to grab supplies. I've got a friend who runs a salvage yard. He owes me a favor. Take my car, she said, reaching into the back pocket of her jeans and tossing him a set of keys. He caught them mid-air and stared down at the fob. Black SUV out front. It's got a full tank, he blinked. That's a $70,000 vehicle. Her expression didn't change. And you're a capable, trustworthy man who's helping me rebuild a house I care about. It seems like a fair trade. Juliet shouted from across the lawn. Dad, I found a frog. Quinn looked over his shoulder. Please don't bring it inside. Ellery laughed. She's fearless. Yeah, he said, pocketing the keys. She gets that from her mom. Her laughter faded gently. She's not around. He shook his head. She left when Juliet was 2, said she wasn't cut out for this kind of life. I wasn't either, not really, but I didn't have the luxury of walking away. Ellery didn't say anything. Just watched Juliet crouch beside a puddle, her hair tangled, her joy uncontained. After a moment, he cleared his throat. I'll be back in an hour. Take your time, she said quietly. I'll make sure Juliet doesn't invite any amphibians into the kitchen. By the time he returned, Ellery was pulling weeds from the garden beds near the front walk, her hands covered in soil, her knees stained from kneeling. She didn't look up until he parked at the curb and stepped out. You weren't kidding, he said, lifting a couple of reclaimed beams from the back. This thing drives smoother than a dream. She wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist. Glad you didn't crash it. Tempted to keep it, he teased. You'd have to fight me for it, she countered, standing and stretching her arms behind her. He carried the beams toward the porch and she followed, brushing dirt from her palms. What made you take this on? He asked, setting the wood down and turning to face her. This house. It's a lot, she hesitated. It belonged to someone I loved. He used to bring me here when I was a kid, said it was the only place he could breathe. Quinn's brow furrowed. Your dad, she nodded. He passed away last year, left me the place. I think he hoped I'd do something with it instead of letting it rot. You're honoring him. Trying to, she said softly. He built things, with his hands. This place was the only thing he never sold. Quinn looked around, seeing the house in a new light. He sounds like someone I would have liked. He would have liked you too, she said, then looked away quickly, like she hadn't meant to say it aloud. Juliet came bounding around the corner, holding a tiny bouquet of dandelions. Look what I made, for me, Ellery asked, crouching to accept them. Juliet shook her head. Nope, for my dad, but you can hold them until he's done with the porch. Ellery laughed, the sound quiet and real. Fair enough. Later that afternoon, as Quinn hammered the last brace into place, Ellery was inside sweeping dust from the hallway tiles. Juliet had fallen asleep on the couch, her hand still holding a half-eaten apple. The sun filtered through the front windows, casting soft light across the room. Quinn stepped inside, wiping his hands on a rag. Porch is secure, at least for a while. Ellery looked up from the broom. You're fast. I've had practice, he said, glancing at Juliet. She slept through all that noise, didn't even twitch, she smiled. She's tougher than she looks. She'd have to be, he said, his voice quieter now. Ellery leaned the broom against the wall. You don't talk about yourself much, not much to say. I disagree. He met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. You ever think about what you'd do if things were different? She asked. He folded his arms. Every day. She took a step closer. What would you change? He hesitated, then spoke without looking away. I'd give her more, a real house, a backyard, a school where the ceiling doesn't leak. Ellery's voice softened. That's not about changing your life, that's about changing hers. Aren't they the same? He asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the drawer near the door and pulled out a small envelope. I was going to wait, but I want you to have this now. He frowned. What's this? Payment for your work today and tomorrow, and the next day. He stepped back. I told you I'm not doing this for money. And I told you I'd pay you fairly, she said. You don't get to be the only stubborn one. He opened the envelope and stared at the check. It was more than he'd made last month, maybe more than the last two combined. I can't, you can, she said gently, because you deserve it. He looked at her, really looked, and realized she wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't throwing money around to feel better about herself. She was trying to give him something he'd stopped believing he was allowed to have respect. He folded the envelope and tucked it into his pocket. Thank you. That night, as Juliet snored softly in the backseat and the city lights blinked in the distance, Quinn drove home with more than just a paycheck in his wallet. He drove home with the unfamiliar weight of hope. Ellery hadn't planned to invite them back so soon. But by the following afternoon, there was a knock at the side door, and when she opened it, Quinn stood there holding a box of mismatched tools and a bag of groceries that looked like it had come from the corner store. I figured you might need a hand with those cabinet hinges, he said, shifting the box to his other arm. And I brought stuff to cook, figured it's my turn. She stepped aside without hesitation. Kitchen's all yours. But if you start a fire, I'm calling it even. Juliet trailed in behind him, arms full of coloring books and her favorite stuffed elephant. Do you still have those pink cookies from last time? They're in the pantry, Ellery said, reaching down to ruffle her hair. You can have one if you promise not to hide any more frogs in the bathtub. That was once, Juliet shouted as she skipped toward the kitchen. Ellery met Quinn's eyes. You're really going to cook in someone else's kitchen? I didn't say it would be gourmet, he said, setting the bag on the counter, but I make a mean grilled cheese. She leaned against the island as he unpacked. Do you always do this? Just show up and start fixing things. Only when the hinges are screaming for help, he replied, holding one up. This one's been hanging on by prayer. She watched his hands as he worked steady, assured, with the kind of quiet focus that couldn't be faked. There was something comforting about it, the way he moved through her house like he belonged there without ever assuming he did. So what did you do before all this? She asked, opening the fridge and pulling out lemonade. Construction, he replied without looking up. Small firms, whatever paid. Then Juliet came along and I started picking up anything I could. Maintenance gigs, odd jobs. Ellery poured 2 glasses and slid one across the counter. You ever want to do something else? He hesitated, then shrugged. I used to think about building furniture, real stuff, not the flat pack junk. But dreams don't pay rent. She didn't argue. She just handed him a screwdriver and opened the drawer he'd be working on next. As he crouched down, she sank into one of the bar stools. What would you make first? He glanced up at her. A bed, solid wood, no nails. Just dovetail joints and precision. Why a bed? Because when you've got a good one, it holds everything, he said, voice lower now. Sleep, safety, people you love. Ellery blinked, caught off guard by the intimacy of the answer. She opened her mouth, but Juliet came bounding back in, cookie crumbs trailing from her shirt. I found your piano, she said, pointing toward the hall. Ellery stood. You want to try it? Juliet nodded eagerly, and Ellery led her into the room off the main corridor, a cozy space with a baby grand against the far wall. The lid closed, dust motes floating in the shafts of sunlight. Juliet climbed onto the bench, her small fingers pressing a few uncertain notes. Do you play? Quinn asked, appearing in the doorway, wiping his hands on a rag. I used to, Ellery said, lifting the lid gently. My mother made me take lessons. I hated it until I didn't. Quinn crossed the room and leaned against the doorway. Play something, she hesitated. Please, he added. She looked at Juliet, who gave her an encouraging nod. Then she placed her hands on the keys and began to play a soft, haunting melody that filled the room like a secret. The notes were clean but unpolished, like someone remembering how to be brave. When she stopped, there was silence. Then Juliet clapped. That was pretty. Quinn's eyes hadn't left her. I didn't know you had music in you, he said quietly. Ellery stood, closing the lid. Most people don't ask. Juliet yawned dramatically and flopped onto the nearby settee. Can we live here? Quinn laughed. We're not moving into someone else's house. Ellery moved to the window and looked out. She's welcome anytime, and me? Quinn asked, half joking. She turned, meeting his eyes. You haven't scared me off yet. He stepped into the room then, closer than before, but not too close. That almost sounds like a challenge. It might be, she said, her voice unsteady for the first time that day. Juliet had dozed off before the sun began to set. They let her sleep on the couch, wrapped in a soft throw. Quinn sat beside her, elbows on his knees, staring at the fading light. Ellery brought him a cup of tea and sat across from him. You know, she said, most people assume things when they see this house. He looked around. I didn't. Not really, she studied him. Why not? Because you were covered in paint, he said, and wearing sneakers with holes in them. She smiled faintly. I liked those sneakers. I did too, he hesitated. You don't talk about what you do. For work, I don't. Because it's complicated. Because it changes things, she said. He nodded slowly. Then don't tell me, not yet. I like things the way they are. She looked at him, eyes searching. Even if I'm not who you think I am, I don't think you're anything, he said. I just know how you make my daughter laugh, and how quiet my head gets when I'm near you. That silenced her more than any secret could. He stood and gently lifted Juliet into his arms. I should get her home. Ellery followed him to the door. Tomorrow, he nodded. Same time, she hesitated, then touched his arm. Bring your tools. I've got a broken railing on the stairs, and maybe stay for dinner again. His gaze held hers. Only if you play the piano after. I might, she said. If you promise not to fix it. He smiled, and this time there was something different in it. Something that settled into her bones and stayed there even after the door closed. As she stood alone in the entryway, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full of something fragile, something new. She looked toward the room with the piano and whispered to herself, I think I'm in trouble. The rain hit hard by mid-afternoon. Not the gentle kind that whispered on rooftops. This was the kind that turned gravel to sludge and made the old gutters on Ellery's house groan under pressure. Quinn pulled his hood tighter as he jogged up the porch steps. Juliet's hand clutched tightly in his. She was laughing, soaked from the knees down, her backpack bouncing as she ran. The door opened before he could knock. Ellery stood in leggings and a worn blue flannel shirt, hair damp at the ends, barefoot on the hardwood. You look like you ran through a waterfall, she said, stepping aside. Juliet slipped in first, dropping her backpack with a dramatic sigh. It's like a swimming pool out there, Quinn followed, tugging off his jacket. Sorry, we got caught halfway down the street when it started coming down. Ellery pointed toward the hallway. Towels in the linen closet. Second shelf. As Quinn disappeared down the hall, Juliet toed off her shoes and looked up at Ellery. Can I have hot chocolate? I just made some, Ellery said, leading her toward the kitchen. With the little marshmallows, Juliet lit up. You're the best person ever. Quinn returned a few minutes later, towel drying his hair. You really need a coat rack. I nearly slipped on your rug. Ellery handed him a mug. Add it to the list. Right after fixing the upstairs windows and replacing the cracked bathroom tile. He took the cup, pausing. You serious about that? About fixing the tile? No, about letting me keep working on this place. Even after it's done. She met his gaze, something unreadable flickering behind her eyes. I was hoping you'd ask. Juliet interrupted mid-sip. Do you guys like each other or what? Quinn choked on his drink. Jules? Ellery turned away, her shoulders shaking with laughter she didn't try to hide. Well, she doesn't waste time, does she? Juliet hopped onto a stool. I'm just saying, you keep coming over, you fix stuff, she makes cookies. That's what happens in books when people fall in love. Quinn set down his mug. All right, that's enough story time for today, but Ellery didn't step away. She looked at him, this time without the teasing smile. She's not wrong. The room fell still. Quinn's chest rose and fell once. I've tried not to think about it. I haven't, she said. I've thought about it every night since the first time you showed up. He stepped around the island slowly. Then why haven't you said anything until now? Because I wasn't sure I was allowed to want something that felt this simple, she said. Not in my world. He stopped a foot from her. You keep saying that. Your world, what is it, Ellery? What are you not telling me? Juliet looked up, wide-eyed. Ellery glanced down at her. Sweetheart, can you go into the living room for a few minutes? There's a puzzle on the coffee table. Juliet hesitated, then nodded and slid off the stool, disappearing around the corner. Ellery leaned against the counter, her arms crossed tightly. I didn't lie to you, Quinn, but I didn't tell you everything either. He waited. My father owned a company, a tech conglomerate. It was worth billions by the time he passed. He left it all to me. Quinn blinked slowly. You're telling me you're yes, she said. I'm a billionaire. The silence stretched long between them. I bought this house because I wanted something untouched, she continued. Something that didn't smell like boardrooms or expectations. I thought if I could fix something real, maybe I could figure out who I was outside of all that. He rubbed the back of his neck, overwhelmed. So all this time. I didn't want you to look at me differently, she said. I didn't want you to think I was trying to fix your life with a checkbook. I don't care about your money, Quinn said, voice low. You could have told me. I wanted to, she said, but every time I tried, I thought, what if it changes everything? He stepped closer. And what if it doesn't? Ellery's breath caught. Do you mean that? He reached for her hand. I've been broke since before Juliet was born, but I've never let it define me. I don't care what's in your bank account. I care about how you look at her like she matters. I care that you've let us into your life without asking for anything in return. She gripped his hand tighter. I want to ask for something now. Anything, he said. Stay, she whispered. Not just for dinner, not just until the house is finished. Stay with us. His voice was thick. I don't have much to offer. You have everything I've been trying to find, she said. And Juliet already thinks you hung the moon. He laughed softly, curling his fingers around hers. We'd have to figure it out, my job, her school. There's a guest house behind the property, Ellery said. It's been sitting empty. You could renovate it, make it yours. I'm not offering charity, Quinn. I'm offering you a home. And if I say yes, she smiled, but this time it was different, tentative, hopeful. Then everything changes in the best way. He didn't answer with words. He leaned forward and kissed her, slow and certain, like every moment leading up to it had been waiting for this one. Juliet's voice came from the other room. Are you kissing? They broke apart, laughing. Quinn called out, Mind your puzzle, Jules. Ellery rested her forehead against his. So, he nodded. We'll try it, one step at a time. She exhaled, relief washing over her features. Later that week, Quinn carried the first box into the guest house. It had good bones, and he had plans for every corner. Juliet painted a sign with her name and hung it on the front door. Ellery brought lemonade and sat on the porch swing, watching them with a look of quiet contentment. The work would never be done, not on the house, not on themselves, but for the first time in years, Quinn didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he was home. And Ellery, billionaire or not, had finally found something money couldn't buy: a family. Her own. The scent of sawdust clung to the late summer air as Quinn tightened the final hinge on the custom cabinet he'd built for the guesthouse kitchen. Juliet sat at the edge of the porch steps, humming to herself while rearranging a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked earlier. Her hair was pulled back in a messy braid, her knees dusted with dirt and grass. From the main house, faint piano notes drifted through the open windows. Ellery was playing again, the melody light, almost teasing. Quinn stood, brushing wood shavings off his jeans, and glanced toward the sound. It had become part of the rhythm of their days: her music, Juliet's laughter, and the steady pulse of rebuilding both space and something larger. Juliet turned to him. "Is it done now?" He nodded. "Almost. Just one more coat of finish and it's yours to organize. Can I put the cookie cutters in the top drawer?" "Deal," he said, chuckling. "But only if you promise not to hide chocolate chips in there again." She grinned. "No promises." Inside the main house, Ellery closed the piano lid and called from the hallway, "Quinn, can you come here for a second?" He wiped his hands on a rag and exchanged a look with Juliet. "Don't redecorate the porch while I'm gone." She held up both hands like a saint. "I won't even move a pebble." Quinn crossed the gravel path between the houses and stepped into the entryway. Ellery stood there, holding a manila folder, her expression unreadable. He frowned. "What's that?" She held it out. "It's for you." "For both of you, actually." He took it, flipping it open. His eyes scanned the documents once, then again. "This is a property deed," she nodded, "to the guest house and the surrounding acre. I made it official this morning." He stared at her. "You're giving us the land." "I'm selling it to you," she said. "For $1, he blinked. "Ellery, I wanted to wait until you finished the renovations just to be sure this was what you wanted. But you've built more than cabinets and walls, Quinn. You've built a home here. And I want it to be yours, not borrowed, not temporary." He set the folder down, his voice rough. "This isn't what I expected when I offered to paint a fence." She took a step closer. "It's not charity. You've earned it 100 times over, and I want Juliet to grow up knowing she belongs here. That this place is hers, too." He hesitated, overwhelmed. "And what about you? Where do you fit in all this?" Ellery's voice dropped. "Right beside you. If you'll let me." He pulled her into his arms before she could say anything else, holding her like the answer had always been yes, even before he knew the question. She pressed her cheek to his chest, her hands curling into the fabric of his shirt. "Do you know how long it's been since I felt this steady?" he whispered. She looked up at him. "Then don't let go." He kissed her, unhurried and certain, and this time there was no hesitation, no unfinished sentences. Only the quiet certainty of two people who had stopped waiting for the right moment and had chosen each other instead. A week later, the town's annual harvest festival arrived, bringing with it strings of amber lights, hay bales, and the smell of cinnamon and roasted corn. Ellery stood beneath the arch of the town square, her hand nestled in Quinn's, watching Juliet race through the maze with a group of kids from school. "She fits here," Quinn murmured. "So do you," Ellery replied. He glanced at her. "You sure you're okay with all this, the quiet life?" "No board meetings, no headlines. I've never been more sure of anything," she said. "I used to think power meant control. Now I think it means choosing what matters and holding onto it with both hands." Quinn reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Ellery froze. "Are you?" "Open it," he said, his thumb tracing her knuckles. Inside was a delicate gold ring with a single sapphire, deep blue like the sky just before nightfall. No diamonds, no flash, just elegance, quiet and true. "It was my mother's," he said. "She gave it to my dad when they got engaged. Said it reminded her of the ocean they couldn't afford to visit." Ellery's breath caught. "Quinn, I want this life with you, all of it. The early mornings, the piano music, the muddy boots on the porch. I want to build every piece of it day by day." She closed the box gently and looked up at him, eyes shining. "Then ask me," he smiled softly. "Ellery Monroe, will you marry me?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." Juliet came barreling toward them a moment later, skidding to a stop when she saw the ring in Ellery's hand. "Is that what I think it is?" Ellery crouched down, holding the box open for her. It's a promise, one we're making together. Juliet's eyes went wide. Does that mean we're really staying forever? Quinn scooped her into his arms. Forever sounds just about right. The wedding was held 2 months later beneath the giant oak tree in the backyard. Close friends, neighbors, and a few of Ellery's longtime staff gathered in folding chairs as music drifted through the crisp autumn air. Juliet walked ahead of them as flower girl, tossing petals with more enthusiasm than precision. Quinn wore a navy suit with his father's cufflinks. Ellery wore a simple ivory dress, her hair pinned with small pearls. She walked barefoot down the makeshift aisle, her eyes never leaving his. When they exchanged vows, there were no elaborate speeches, just quiet, heartfelt promises. Honest, earnest, anchored in everything they'd built. Afterward, as twilight settled in and lanterns glowed across the yard, Ellery leaned her head on Quinn's shoulder. "Do you remember," she murmured, "when you told me you'd build a bed first if you ever got the chance?" He kissed her temple. "I've already started, solid oak. Dovetail joints. I want to help," she said. "Deal," he replied, "but only if you promise not to hide marshmallows in the drawers." She laughed softly. "No promises." Juliet danced barefoot with the neighbor's dog looping around her ankles, and for the first time in years there was no ache in Quinn's chest. No waiting for the other shoe to drop, just home. A real one, theirs.